So today I'm in Union City at the Riverside Cemetery, and I came in part to do a tour of this cemetery and show you some of the history here, but I also want to show you some of the great work that is being done by the Union City Society for Historic Preservation. Bobbie Mathis, who is the president of that organization here in Union City at the current time, invited me to come join her and the crew that was doing the work today. I was able to see some of it and film some of it, so I'm going to include that in the video. But the important part is I really want you to see the incredible work that they're doing and reach out to them to perhaps do some work in the cemetery near you, because this kind of work is very important to preserving history. So come along and join me. I hope you will enjoy today's tour. I have been long looking forward to creating a video for Riverside Cemetery in Union City. Since I first drove through here last winter, I've been driving by this cemetery for years, and I'd never really taken notice of it until very recently. Since that time, I've become friends with the president of the Union City Society for Historic Preservation, Bobbie Mathis. Together we share a common fascination with discovering nuggets of local history, and she's even been a guest on my podcast. So I'll include the link to that episode in the video description if you want to listen to it. On the weekend I visited this cemetery, she was hosting a day-long headstone repair and restoration workshop with her contacts from the Cemetery Conservators of the United Standards. This CCUS organization is best described as a talented group of people who are experts at repairing damaged headstones and markers, especially the historic gravestones. I was able to film some of their restoration work on my visit, so be sure to watch to the end of this video, and I'm going to show you some of the amazing work that they're doing. First, let's explore some of the history of this wonderful cemetery. Bobbie Mathis was kind enough to share with me her research on many of these stories that I'll share with you today. So I'll be including some links to her group called Saving Graves in the description of this video, so be sure to check those out. I'll also put the links to the cemetery repair companies there as well, if you'd like to reach out to them to help restore some headstones near your area. Perhaps the most impressive and noticeable monument when you enter Riverside Cemetery is the one standing over the gravesite of Alexander McCrary. He was born in Hector, New York on March 9, 1815. His parents were Joseph McCrary and Abigail Culver. He was the second of 12 children born in that union. He attended the local schools in several communities as his parents moved several times during his youth. Early on, his father lost most of his money on business ventures, so Alexander was left to his own resources as a young adult. He was employed by his own neighbors doing farm work, often for just 50 cents a day. He arrived in Detroit in 1835 at the age of 20 with $10.50 in his pocket and a few pieces of clothing on his back. In Detroit, he was employed by a hotel owned by Adolphus Gully for a period of about 18 months. He married Harriet Dean in 1836 at his father's home in Teconcha, who had also moved to Michigan, and together they would have 8 children. They were the first couple to be married in that township. Alexander made his living as a farmer and gradually, over the years, acquired more land and was very interested in good horses and hogs. In 1860, he was living in Sherwood, and his real estate value was $9,400, and a personal estate value was $860. In today's value, factoring in inflation, that net worth would be roughly $360,000. He at one time would own 1,200 acres of land. His father would pass away in 1856 and his mother in 1863. Alexander was a capitalist and became quite influential in the community, and also became the director of the Union City Bank. One day, during his early married life, he was attacked by a bear in the woods. His only weapon with him was an axe, which he killed the animal with while wading through 2 feet deep in snow. Upon his death, his brother Lawrence wrote the following memorial to him. The form once erect
in its manhood and pride, with firm tread that appeared on the street, whose hardy frame time and tempest defied, now lies a wreck at our feet. But death was the victor, we bow to his will, the golden bowl broken, the brave heart is still. He fought the fierce fight in the battle of life with courage majestic and grand. And many that fell by his side in the strife he raised with generous hand. True love for mankind in his actions we trace. Success crowned his efforts in every place. His course is now run and we lay him to rest with hearts full of tender love, a brother and friend, the kindest and best. We commend to the Father above. We trust in his grace, but with a sorrowful dimmed eye, hoping one day to meet him, we bid him goodbye. Alexander died from heart failure in 1898 at the age of 83. The large monument that stands at the family plot cost $2,000 at the time of his death. He was a man of excellent habits, never drank liquor or smoked tobacco, and he had the following children: Adelard, Adolphus, Leroy, Laura, Henry, Frank, Miriam, and Calvin. His son Calvin enlisted in the 5th Michigan Cavalry in 1862 and became a non-commissioned officer. He was killed at the Battle of Cold Harbor in 1864. Perhaps the most famous grave in this cemetery is that of George Sigourney Aker, who was born in Rochester, New York in 1835. He enlisted at the start of the Civil War in the 1st Michigan Volunteer Cavalry, being commissioned at the age of 24 as a captain and commander of Company I on August 21, 1861. He led his command into battle on the spring of 1862 at Shenandoah Valley and at the Second Battle of Bull Run, rising first to major September 2nd, 1862, and then lieutenant colonel on November 3rd that same year of that regiment. A few months later, on January 22nd, 1863, he was transferred to the 9th Michigan Volunteer Cavalry to help recruit the new regiment and serve as its lieutenant colonel. The unit was mustered into federal service in May of 1863, and he participated in the regiment's first field duty, the pursuit of Confederate General John Hunt, Morgan's raiders in Kentucky and Ohio, in which he commanded a portion of his unit in the Battle of Bluffington Island, Ohio. After Morgan was captured, the unit joined with General Ambrose Burnside's forces in East Tennessee, where it engaged in continual scouting and skirmishing. On November 14, 1863, Lieutenant Colonel Aker was wounded at Bean Station, Tennessee, and missed a large portion of his unit's subsequent service, but returned to lead it as a full colonel in the spring of 1864, receiving his promotion on November 30th that same year. After helping to inflict a loss to the forces of General Morgan, who had escaped the Federals' hold at Cynthiana, Kentucky, he continued to fight in Lower Kentucky and Tennessee until October 1864, when the unit was detailed to General William T. Sherman's army fighting in Georgia. He participated in the March to the Sea and the March up the Carolinas, where he finished out the war. He was breveted Brigadier General, U.S. Volunteers, March 13th, 1865, for gallant and soldierly conduct under all circumstances during the East Tennessee and Atlanta campaigns, especially at Morristown, East Tennessee, on December 1863, at Bean Station for conspicuous gallantry at Cynthia in June of 1864. After the war, he would become a successful hotel keeper and died in Kalamazoo on September 6th, 1879, at the age of 43. Today, when visiting Riverside Cemetery, there are markers pointing to the location of his gravesite when you come to visit. Another popular grave to visit in this cemetery is the Gaw family monument, which is said to be a meteor, which is described in the book Meteor by Patricia Paleko, who is a member of this family. In this children's book, published in 1996, a meteor crash lands in the middle of Grandma and Grandpa Gaw's yard and sets off a chain of events that brings magic to the residents of Mucksock Meadow. The book is said to be based on a true event. Many members of the Gaw family are buried here in the same plot. George Gaw, who was born in Erie County, Ohio in 1844, to Carlton Gaw and Maria Martin, he operated a hay business, which he started in 1886. He secured hay and straw for the village of Union City from shipments. He owned and operated several hay presses and hay balers. His warehouse was once located at the airline station next to the railroad tracks. From there, he also purchased and shipped to other points in Branch, Calhoun, Jackson, and St. Joseph counties. He was married to Harriet Wadsworth, and together they had 8 children. He passed away in 1913 at the age of 68. Another impressive monument in this cemetery is that of Dr. William and Caroline Hurd. William Philemon Hurd, M.D., was born in 1813 in Roxbury, Connecticut, to Thomas Hurd and Elizabeth Canfield. During his time in the community of Union City, he was affectionately known as Doc Billy, as he was a rural saddlebag and buggy doctor. In the 1840s, William came to Michigan from Genesee County, New York, with his brothers Theodore and Homer, where they arrived in Union City. In 1842, he met and married Caroline Hobart, a sister of the local congregational minister. He retired from medicine around 1860 out of protest of the drafting of field doctors in the War of the Rebellion. In 1869, he began planning construction of his beloved villa on the corner of Broadway and Berry Street in Union City. It was completed in 1876, and he and Caroline moved into that spacious home around that time. He served the Union City community as president and chairman of the Union City National Bank in 1880. He died in 1881 of Bright's disease, a kidney ailment, at the age of 68. His wife Caroline was born Caroline Elizabeth Hobart in Yatesville, New York, to Baxter Hobart and Eliza Potter. She was a director of stockholders of the Union City National Bank and a benevolent benefactor to many local organizations in the community. She died in 1910 from gallstones. The Victorian villa that she built with William in 1876 to this day is said to be haunted by her ghost, as many guests have claimed to have seen her apparition roaming the house. Orly Scott was a successful, wealthy farmer in the Union City area who was originally born in New York. During his time, he had a real estate and personal estate value of over $90,000, which would be worth $2.3 million in today's dollars. He died of typhoid fever in 1883 at the age of 57. His monument, which cost $4,500 at the time it was created, stands as one of the 3 most prominent statues in the cemetery, along with the Hurd and McCrary statues. His wife Cordelia, who is buried next to him, was born in Metz, New York, and was the daughter of Samuel Rowe and Phila McDaniels. She came to Michigan with her parents in 1837. They traveled by boat to Detroit and then by oxen to Union Township, arriving just before Michigan became a state. They built their home in the primitive forest, and the road between their home and Union City was marked only by a blazed trail. She married Orly Scott in 1862, and they lived on Ellen Street in Union City. When Orly died in 1883, she would eventually marry Dr. M.W. Thatcher in 1891, and they moved to Marshall Street in Coldwater. When Dr. Thatcher died in 1897, she moved back to Union City, where she lived until her death. She was always regarded as a woman of keen insight, possessing exceptional business abilities, and her loss was felt deeply by those who knew her in the community. Colonel Thomas Mosley was born in Pittsfield, Massachusetts in 1794. His parents were Josiah Abbott Mosley and Abigail Maynard Holt. During the War of 1812, he served in the New York 15th Artillery Militia. He's listed as a lieutenant colonel and later as a colonel on the War of 1812 enlistment records. In 1816, he migrated to St. Louis, Missouri, but did not find a lot of prospects there, so he retraced his steps back to Manillas, New York. It was there that he set up a mercantile trade. He married Mary Ann Tillotson in Farmington, Connecticut in 1819. Together, they had 4 children. In 1828, he moved to New York City, where he was elected as an elder of his church. He eventually moved to Michigan, and his wife Mary died in 1834, and he married Maria M. Tillotson in New York, who was a sister-in-law. Together they would have 7 children. They came to Union City around 1841, and by the 1860 census, he was listed as a farmer in Burlington. In his later years, he was a prominent businessman. He established a blast furnace at Union City, which he conducted for several years, and he instituted a number of early pioneer enterprises. He was a member of the Congregational Church, taking a most active and helpful part in its work and contributing most generously toward the building of that house of worship. His name headed the subscription list for the sum of $500, and later he gave an additional sum of $50 towards the purchase of the bell. His early political views accorded with the Whig principles, and upon the organization of the new Republican Party to prevent the further extension of slavery, he joined its ranks and followed its banners until he died in 1873. Part of the restoration efforts that were done on the Saturday when I was filming here was on various headstones. Some of the stones that they were working on involved leveling them, and others were creating new concrete foundations. The stone here had several problems. It was lying broken in pieces for years. The foundation at one point had shifted, and the stone had come loose from its base and then fell over and broke. They created a new foundation, secured it to the new base, and mended the broken stone. Now, I was not present to film or take notes on the materials they used or watch this repair in progress, and I would caution anyone attempting this kind of repair to not do it without taking a class first with the Cemetery Conservators of United Standards to learn the proper materials to use and the approach to do this. Bobbie showed me some of the seam work they did to repair this stone and how they braced it.
There's epoxy, we cleaned her. We're gonna let her set and cure. Then I take these off and I fill the seam with an agent that will match the material of this.
The wooden braces will remain in place for several days to allow the repairs to set up properly. Also notice they used a canopy over the area while they were working on it. This monument was knocked over by a large branch that broke off of a tree that was above it and broke loose during a storm in the area. It fell on this massive headstone with such force that it toppled over, and the stone cylinder on top, referred to as a Tootsie Roll, fell over as well. These stones were too heavy and too large to be manually lifted back in place, even by a team of several men. In order to accomplish the task of putting it back together, they used heavy fabric straps and a winch and a pulley system to lift these stones back into place. It was a fascinating process to watch and also to listen to these contractors as they worked through all the steps to safely put these stones back in place without damaging them. In the end, they were successful and brought the stone back into its original position, including reinstalling the cylindrical stone on top. Very incredible work. Riverside Cemetery is a fascinating place to visit, and it's rich in history. Once again, I want to thank Bobbie Mathis from the Union City Society for Historic Preservation for her help with the research on this video, and also for inviting me to film part of their incredible workshop on cemetery headstone repair. Be sure to check out all of the links in the video description below so that you can be informed about future workshops that her organization is holding, and especially if you want to learn how to do this type of work yourself. And be sure to check out the podcast episode that I did with Bobbie, where we cover a lot of interesting topics on Union City history. That link will be listed below as well.
So this is one of the most impressive cemeteries in Southwest Michigan, in my opinion. I've been to a lot of them. It's right up there with some of the impressive ones like Oak Hill Cemetery in Battle Creek, and some of the other ones that I haven't yet featured on this YouTube channel yet, like Riverside over in Albion and some of the other places around. But this definitely has a lot of tremendous history here. And I'm so happy I came here. The last time I was here, I did a little quick filming, but it was freezing cold, so it's so nice to be able to walk around here in the summertime. I want to thank all the great people that did cemetery restoration here today of a lot of the headstones, and I'm going to put all the links to their organizations that I collected in the description down below so that you guys can reach out to them and perhaps have them do some work in your local cemetery. And I want to thank Bobbie Mathis for giving me some insight and some direction and telling me where some of the more interesting headstones and graves were. And especially if you like today's video, please take a minute to show your support. Hit the like button down there and subscribe to the channel and share the video with others so other people can come along and join us on future adventures. And of course, check out my podcast, Tales of Southwest Michigan's Past, where I get to carry a lot of stories, and there's even an interview on there with Bobbie Mathis. So check that out as you're driving to and from work, and thanks for watching.